Hi everybody, it's Robin from Toadstool Tarot. I kind of debated whether to do this VR to my top 5 of 2020. I wasn't sure if it was a bit redundant because if you follow my channel, you've seen the walkthroughs of all of these already. But also, the bulk of the decks that I acquired in 2020 didn't come out in 2020. They were older decks or scarce or rare decks. But I did go through, I did manage to find 5, along with a couple of honorable mentions. The first one will go from sort of least to favorites. The first one, I wasn't sure whether to include this or not. This is the Edmund Du Lac Tarot. And I think this is a beautiful deck, but it's one where the artwork of Edmund Du Lac was basically imposed upon the tarot system, or vice versa. The tarot system was imposed upon his artwork. So I wouldn't say it was an easy deck to read, but in general, actually after I got it, I sort of set it aside because I did have difficulty in reading it. But recently I've gotten back into it because I like the deeper dive meditation in the images. We can find meaning almost anywhere, even where it's not particularly intended. There is a psychological term called pareidolia, which you can look up, which is basically the idea, I'm sure you've all experienced it, where you've seen pictures looking at cloud formations, or maybe in the patterns in wood grain or oil spills, even tea leaf reading, I suppose, where you see images that aren't specifically there, but your mind tries to make logical images or patterns from seemingly random arrangements of things. And back in my early art days in the city, I did a series of what I called psycholages, which I don't have here to show you, but they were small collages comprised of 3 elements. There were a pair of images, unrelated images, side by side in their own little bordered or framed boxes. And then below them, a 2-word phrase in another bordered box. And the idea was you had 3 elements that were unrelated, but you forced a relationship by putting all 3 of them in the same frame. And you ended up being able to find some meaning in relating the 3 in some sort of a story, or building a relationship where there wasn't one specifically intended. Now, this deck is mostly depicting fairy tales, and this will come up again soon in another walkthrough, which I want to call Pixie's Contemporaries, because Du Lac was an illustrator in the age of Pamela Coleman Smith. So that is the Edmund Du Lac Tarot in position number 5. Next we have from Conrad Stain, a Tarot de Marseille. It is the Arno Tarot. It's a Besançon with Jupiter and Juno. And this is a favorite of mine. I might say of all the Tarot de Marseille decks in my collection, this is probably my personal favorite. I just really like the coloring in it. The images are nice and sharp and clean. I'm not big on those decks that have wood blocks with sloppy coloring, shading, outside of the outlines. Apparently we're done with stencils. I like the sort of aged edge look on these cards, as well as the coloring. See, so that's number 4. Number 3 would be a deck I just acquired recently, the Tarot Soprafino. This is from Lo Scarabeo. It's a beautiful lift-off top, sturdy box. And I love the size and feel of these lovely cards. Also, again, a kind of an antique-y look. And the beautiful coloring and detail line work. Very refined. Beautiful. So that is number 3, Lo Scarabeo, the Tarot Soprafino. Number 2 on my list would be the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. This again is in a beautiful box. And this did come with rounded corners, but I rounded them further to make it that much more comfortable for me. This is based on the artwork of Odilon Redon, who is another contemporary of Pixie and will reoccur in that walkthrough. Although his artwork has been altered in this deck by adding swords and wands, etc. But it's a beautifully colored deck. This is linen finish, this deck. The Lonely Dreamer Tarot at number 2. Now, at number 1, I know people are going to think me conceited, but this is one of my decks. And the decks I picked here today are ones that I'm most passionate about this year in 2020. This did come out in 2020, and it's my Open Face Tarot. And I'm not sure, the one I have several editions or versions of this, and the one that I'm particularly fond of is the smallest, cheapest one. I don't know if I love it all the more because it fits in this fantastic bag that I already happen to have with this phoenix on it, this little brocade bag. I just adore this bag and the deck that fits in it. This is the first run-through of this small-size deck. It actually has the type in black type. Later, they came out with brown type. And these are the backs. And I just absolutely love this deck to death. I have such a personal relationship with it because it was my first attempt at creating my own deck, and the inspiration took me, and I did the whole thing in a day. And I almost felt like I was channeled to do it. And some of the images could be improved upon, but it just, everything felt right at the right time. And this one has no titles on it. I did versions that were larger with titles. But somehow I feel like the images are just the most sparse, standalone, perfect, ideal elements from the major arcana, and work for anybody, anywhere in the world, regardless of what language you speak, to interpret these images. Helps, I suppose, a little bit more if you have a tarot reading reference. But even without the titles, you shouldn't have any trouble figuring out which of these cards corresponds to which of the major arcana cards. This deck is available at Make Playing Cards for, I think, $7.65 or $7.85 or under $8, I think, which I feel is a true bargain. I also have other versions of it. I have a larger version. This is regular tarot size with titles on it. And these are all on my favorite S30 cardstock from Make Playing Cards. It just feels so slippery and silky and luxurious. It's my favorite stock. But I have these in with titles. I also have another version, like the small one, without the titles. So it depends on your preference in terms of titled, untitled, larger, smaller size. I even have one that combines the two decks together in one package. But even with these options, I still prefer the smaller one. And for those that you say, oh, he's conceited, he picked his own deck. Well, I did another deck this year, and I didn't choose that one for this. That's the Eyes Wide Tarot, and that didn't make my top 5. So there you go. Criticisms or not, those are my top 5 tarots of 2020. It's a very personal thing. Decks that I feel particularly passionate about, with the exception of the Du Lac, which I'm still kind of pondering. But the other 5, or I should say other 4, I feel very strongly about. Oh, I should mention I have a couple honorable mentions. One of them that almost made the list was the Dream Keeper's Tarot. This, along with the Lonely Dreamer Tarot, are 2 decks that I feel really drawn to this year. But this one, linen finish again, this one came out actually in 2018, so it didn't fit the 2020 criteria. But I believe she's republished this for the mass market that is currently on Amazon for pre-orders. So I don't know if it's going to be released prior to 2021, which would mean it still is in 2020, or whether this will be a 2021 deck. This again is not perhaps the easiest read, but very good for sitting and contemplating meditatively. This one I like very much too. The other honorable mention is a recent publication from Du Lac. It's the Tarot of Marseille 2020 edition. This comes with a fat little white book, little red book, full color, and linen finish cards, thick, sturdy cardstock. Bright, cheery, colorful Marseille deck with gorgeous shading. I love this devil, actually, this blue devil. Nice moon. Somebody recently commented on my walkthrough of this that they found the characters looking a little bit too Disney, and I didn't quite get it, although I can see it in this card. She seems like a very Disney, contemporary like Disney queen, princess. I just love the coloring and shading in this deck. So, there you have it, my top 5 for 2020 with a couple of honorable mentions. Thanks, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.